I hereby call this meeting of the Norwood City Council to order. Please rise. Please rise for the invocation by Pastor Vince from Love City Church. Pastor.
Will you pray with me? Father, we come before you in a spirit of thanksgiving. First, Lord, I thank you for this meeting. I thank you for what it represents, for each one of these elected officials, for the sacrifice they're making to serve our community, to work together to come up with solutions and a forward-looking vision for our future. Lord, I thank you for Norwood. Thank you for what we represent in this region. I thank you for the truth, Lord, that this community is not the buildings and the roads and the bridges, it's the people, that this community is strong. It's been through a lot, and you have a great future ahead. And I ask for your help in this meeting particularly, that, Lord, we would all work together in a spirit of unity, looking for agreement where it can be found, that we would be charitable where there's disagreement, and that would continue into every part of what it takes for us all to band together and to make this a place where people can thrive and grow. Thank you for this community. Thank you for these people. Thank you, Lord, for all that will happen here tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Now for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Gears, please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Here.
Mrs. Hoover.
Here.
Ms. Royce.
Here.
Mr. Kelsch. Mrs. Winterbauer.
Here.
Mr. Thompson. Mr. Braden.
Here.
We have 5 members present this evening. Moving on to item E, amendment of agenda. We have a few items tonight, so please bear with me. The first item, we're adding an ordinance. This is the settlement ordinance. That's going to be L4. We are going to put that after communications. We're going to add executive session prior to that. So we'll have executive session and then that ordinance. We're also adding a state capital improvement ordinance. That will be item L3. Then we have a letter from Donna Lake regarding retiree benefit program. That will be P2. I believe that is all the items. Mr. Braden.
A motion that we amend the agenda as stated.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. May I have a second? Mrs. Hoover.
I second the motion.
Second by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item F, January 11th, 2022 minutes. Mr. Braden.
Motion to accept the minutes as written.
Motion by Mr. Braden to accept the minutes. Mrs. Franzen.
I second.
Second by Mrs. Franzen. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item H, request to address council. We have 4 this evening. The first request to address council is Mrs. Glenda Smith. Please come forward. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, President Miracle. My name, again, is Glenda A. Smith, and I want to applaud this council on your leadership skills, because the last time I was here, the community was talking about tobacco sales to young people, and the leadership did an excellent job of hearing those people. Congratulations to the new members. Again, my name's Glenda A. Smith. I'm running for Hamilton County Juvenile Court because Hamilton County Juvenile Court is 30 years behind the rest of the country and 12 years behind the rest of Ohio in juvenile justice reforms that are humane, effective, efficient, cost savings, while keeping the community safe. I've seen the impact of these reforms. I'd like to bring them here to Hamilton County. I can't do it by myself, but I can do it with your support. Go to glendaforjudge.com to join the movement. I have 20-plus years' experience representing poor people in juvenile court, other state courts, appellate courts, federal courts, all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. I didn't get that privilege by myself. I have had family support, my church family, teachers, principals, IU chancellor, and others that have helped me along the way. I was raised by a single parent in public housing. I was a teen mother. I was ostracized and told implicitly or explicitly that I would never get out of public housing. Because of faith, work ethic, and charity, I have a bachelor's, master's in public affairs, and doctorate in jurisprudence. I have 4 children. My oldest child has a master's in social work. My son is a journeyman electrician, and he is with IBEW Local 648. My 3rd child graduated from Wellesley College in 2020, and my 4th child is in her 2nd year at Howard University. If you want a juvenile court judge that knows children, family, and obstacles, then I am that person. So once again, I need your support. Go to glendaforjudge.com and see the ways that you can support the campaign. Are there any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Forgive my ignorance on this part. Will you be running in the primary election this year, or is it just for the November election that you'll be on the ballot?
Correct. That's a very good question. I will be running in the primary, which is May 3rd, and early voting starts April 5th.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Great. I have some information for you. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. It was a privilege.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Our next request to address council is Mrs. Yvonne Collins.
Can I put this on? Sure. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today, and to the new council members that were elected. Congratulations. It's nice seeing you. I wish I could be here more to the meetings, but I work second shift. I took off today for this very important reason. And it is with sadness that I have to discuss this issue. I tried to do it privately with our Norwood Police Department. I tried to speak to the mayor. He would not return my call. I tried to speak with your sergeants, lieutenants. They would not answer. I tried to speak to detectives. They would not answer. This is very serious. I moved here in 1995. I've been living here 27 years. My house is paid for. I'm a single mom. I did that on my own in less than 20 years. I worked hard. My kids graduated from Norwood High School. They're doing well. I was living a very boring single life, working through COVID, just trying to stay in a positive mental state of mind. In February 5th of 2020, a guy that lives here in Norwood started stalking me. It's not an ex, not a friend, not a family. He was someone I filed a small claims case against. There is a drone right now outside this building watching everything I do. It has been following me since September of last year. Every single day, every single night, every single minute. If I go to the bathroom, that drone goes with me. It hovers over 3811 South Madison Avenue on the south side. The neighbors on the south side have had enough. They are starting to pick up on the drone, and they are starting to call 911. I was calling 911 every single night. I told them I was calling every single night. They know me by name. Norwood will not touch it. I went to Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. They said they would investigate. They would help me. Only if Norwood would say yes. Norwood said no. Cincinnati Police, I filed reports there. They said yes, we will investigate it. If Norwood says yes. Norwood said no. I called FAA, Federal Aviation. I've called and contacted the FBI. I asked Norwood Police Department, who does not believe this is stalking is true. Give me a lie detector test. I'll go there anywhere, anytime, any day, night, and I will pay for it. To let you know that what I'm saying is 100% absolutely true. Norwood will not touch it. I know why. I know what they did to me. They had me arrested. Norwood had me arrested because I kept going to them saying, this guy is stalking me, and make no mind, I'm not the first woman he's done this to. I'm not the first person. You don't get a small claims case and wake up and do this amount of stalking. You've done this before, and you've probably done it to women. You live near Xavier, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's hovered that drone over many, many Xavier students. Many. So what I'm asking while I'm here, that people on the south side continue to call 911. I'm asking the city to get involved and stop the drone. You can see it, you can hear it. It only leaves when I leave for work at 2 o'clock every day to go to Blue Ash. And it returns when I come home around 12 midnight, sometimes 1, sometimes 1:30. It's there every single day. And you can hear it over 71 South, 71 North. You can stand in Burwood Park. You can hear it. You can see it sometimes. He does like to hide behind clouds. He's starting to hide more now, lower the effect of the drone now, since he knows that I'm speaking here tonight. He knows that I'm starting to go public with it. I did get a call from a news channel the other day, interested in this story, since I can't get Norwood to budge. 27 years I've lived in this community and paid taxes. And I come to them one time, February 10th, 2020, and I said, I think this guy is stalking me. And ever since then, they've told me to go away. I went away. I don't like trouble. But I will find some good trouble. And I think I'm in it now. I'm no longer going to be quiet about this. I'm no longer. It's been a year. A year. This guy has stalked me every single day.
Thank you, Mrs. Collins.
You're welcome. And thank you for listening, and thank you for your time. And everybody, thank you.
Our third request to address council is Bishop Sonny James.
Greetings, fellow Norwoodians. First, let me say that for years I have pressed, and for years I will continue to press. I don't have an existence unless that existence is to help pave the way to change the lives of people that don't feel like their voices are heard. One step in the right direction is diversity, more inclusion. I think as we look at our new makeup of council, we're beginning to see great changes. We're beginning to see new opportunities come to those that truly love this community, just like I do. I'm excited that we had our Martin Luther King pop-up marches. It was fun. Popped up on streets, popped up in the neighborhood. We had residents excited to see children with signs and banners and posters celebrating the legacy of someone that we all know embraced change. And come February, the month of February, much like we did last year, Black History Month, we have all kinds of events and things planned. I want to challenge all of us to just, as we embrace diversity, let us go about it differently. What good does it do us to look different and to have different ideologies, but not be able to come together and show people that the old myth of Norwood, and it's still out there, just go and ask anybody. In fact, there was a council member who's not here tonight, challenged that, and I took him to a local bar. That's right, the pastor took him, met him at the bar. And I didn't know a soul in that bar. And I just picked out a random person. And I said, yo, would you mind coming over here? I said, tell me what you think about Norwood. And the person said, I got 3 letters for you. Neither of those letters started with A. Rhymes though, K. And the individual who's not here tonight looked and said, well, do you feel safe in this community? The person looked at him and just said, I'm paraphrasing, are you crazy? Guys, we're coming a long way. Just look. Congratulations. But I have a 3rd grader at Sharpsburg Elementary. And I tell her every day, go and be the salt of the earth, the light of this world. And don't you worry. Daddy's going to be out there every day paving the way. So one day, not only will we see diversity in here, but the end goal is to have that seat right there filled with a person of color. One that really understands and embraces the need to demand equality. One that really isn't flexible to status quo. And I just want to celebrate today because I have the opportunity to stand before a body of people, to stand before neighbors and residents that oftentimes, if they don't have to speak, oftentimes won't speak. Not because I've done anything wrong, but oftentimes because I've exposed their friends. Oftentimes because I've told the truth. Or oftentimes because I showed up in court and we had to do the spank to get justice. Guys, as we move into Black History Month, I'm encouraging all of you, come on out and support us. You know, soon my wife will be the first Black female doctor that lives, works, and ministers in this neighborhood. Let's all support each other. I love this community. God bless you all, and let's keep moving forward. Economic inclusion. God bless you.
Our next request to address council, Mrs. Elizabeth Bloom with Norwood Housing Action Plan.
Hi, Mayor and Council, thanks for having me. I'm Liz Bloom. I work at the Community Building Institute at Xavier. And tonight I'm here representing a team, the Community Building Institute, LISC, the Local Initiative Support Corporation, and Hamilton County all work together to put this together. And I'm going to ask, do you need me to do this in 5 minutes?
No.
Because
I think someone had said.
I could try. Okay, great. So thank you so much. So I want to just give you a little bit of context. The reason that we're here is about a year and a half ago, Hamilton County, the Community Development Department, was really interested in seeing whether there were communities in the county that were interested in thinking more about using the CDBG allocation for housing. They were particularly interested in affordable housing, but they were interested in housing in general and CDBG allocations that might support housing. And so to start that work, the county said which jurisdictions are interested. And Norwood raised their hand. You are among the first round of communities that we've done this work with. Your peers are Silverton, Deer Park, Addiston, Cheviot. So there were 5. We're getting ready to start up Gulf Manor. And I think we've got about 4 more this year. So anyway, I just wanted to give you that context to get you started. I apologize for having to do this. Can you go to the next slide, please? I'm going to do that.
I'll do my best.
Just to give you a sense of what this research is all about, we really did this in 3 pieces. What I'm going to present tonight is some current trends around your housing market, owner occupancy, rental rates, sale prices. We also did some demographic research to pair with that. We did a whole series of interviews in Norwood. Thank you, Mayor, several other people in the community, to flesh out that data, right? Data says one thing, but it's also really helpful to hear from people in the community what the data doesn't tell us. And so we did some field investigation as well. So this is a summary of those findings. And if you go to the next slide, please. There are a couple of particular things that I want to talk about with you, and I'm guessing that these are not going to be issues that surprise you. There is a very strong housing market in Norwood right now. The single-family home sale appreciation in Norwood is among the highest in the county right now. Your appreciation, not the total values, but the appreciation. And in the middle of that, there are all kinds of changing homeownership rates. You've actually lost a little bit in terms of homeownership, but I want to unpack that a little bit because I think that there's more to that story. I think there are changes in student housing. So I'm kind of wearing 2 hats tonight. I work at the Community Building Institute, and I'm here as a planning consultant with the team I described, but I also live at Xavier. And so I've got some of that to share as well. I want to tell you that households in Norwood that are making less than $50,000 are having a hard time making their housing payments work, and that puts a strain on households. I'll unpack that a little bit. And I also want to suggest that there's a lot of new housing product in Norwood over the last 5 years, which I think is a good thing, and I want to encourage you to keep expanding the housing product, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. So I'm going to first talk, you switch, yep, sorry. I want to talk about people in Norwood first. I want to start, housing is about where people live. Just shy of 20,000 people in Norwood. I would tell you that your population is stabilizing. You've lost a little bit of population between 2010 and 2020, but not nearly the declines that you saw in the first between 20 and 2010. So I'm going to tell you, I think your housing market, your population is stabilizing. It's becoming more diverse. To the point, about 12% of the population today is Black, 6% is Latino. and you have a growing single-person household mix. So I think the story in a lot of first suburban communities is this is places where people raise their children, and it absolutely is. But the fastest growing part of the population are single people. Either that's seniors that are living alone or young people who haven't formed households yet. But it is, and you are not alone. This is true in Hamilton County as well. But it means that, again, I'm going to go to this housing product types. Other kinds of housing products probably make sense in this community as you move forward. And you also have a younger population than other places. If you want to go to that next slide, there's a couple of charts that sort of describe this. And one of the things I'm going to tell you is the things that Norwood exhibits here that look different than Hamilton County, the dark blue graph charts are Hamilton County and the bright blue is Norwood. On the left, we're talking about household types, single-person housing, households, non-family households, families with children, married people with children, single female-headed households. That's what you're seeing on the left. On the right, what you're seeing is age breakdowns. And we did that in, generations. You see Gen Zers are the youngest, millennials, which is the 18 to 34-year-olds, where you are way off the chart. You are way off the chart because you have a big student population. And the other thing I will share is that you have slightly fewer baby boomers, people like me, and matures, people over 75. So this is really, you have a younger population than you might think of when you think about Norwood. And again, I think that has a lot to do with how many students you have in the community, but it also has to do with new folks moving into the community. Oh, so now I want to switch, could I ask you to go one more time? Now I want to switch to talk a little bit about the people who live here. Appreciated the comment earlier. And now I want to talk about the housing stock. About half your housing stock is single-family homes. About 28% of the housing stock is in small multis, 2 families, 3 families, 4 families, up to 10. Those are pretty consistent with Hamilton County numbers. So you are in some ways pretty consistent with the county. You have very few in large multifamily buildings, although that's changing. Some of the new construction, the new product types that I've mentioned over the last 5 years are in that kind of product. The other thing, and this, I'm sure I'm not telling you anything, on the right over there, the big Norwood Big Blue, much more than Hamilton County, is you have an older housing stock. You have a significantly larger proportion of the market that's built before 1939, and you don't have very much new construction, which is the bottom. So I said earlier, one more slide. I said earlier that you have a very strong housing market right now. Between 2014 and 2020, according to MLS, single-family home sale values rose by 90%. It's a big number. It's a significant increase. In 2020, MLS listed the median sale price in Norwood as $185,000. I want to tell you just to check, because we're already 2 years out from there today. I went on the MLS listings, and there were 22 single-family units for sale for between $195,000 and $300,000. There were 11 between $300,000 and $400,000, and there was 1 over 4 and 1 over 6. So this is a market that continues to experience this upward pressure. It's also a very active housing market. In 2020, there were over 349 sales. It's a lot of sales in a little community like Norwood. There are over 50 units on the market today in January in Norwood. That's a lot of activity. And I can tell you, and Keith was around when we did a study many, many moons ago. This was a fairly stagnant is the word that comes to mind, a fairly staid housing market for a very long time. Stuff didn't move. There wasn't a lot of product on the market, single family or otherwise. So it is really an accelerating market, both in terms of value and sales turnovers. And I've said this a couple of times, so I apologize, you're attracting new kinds of development. Carpenter Flats, University Station added over 200 units to your housing market since 2014. Factory 52, which I think is a great thing. The first phase is going to add another 270 units in denser, more multifamily product, specifically to some folks. I also want to talk about renovation of existing single-family housing stock. There's lots of that price appreciation means that people are investing in these old homes. And there's been a lot of move to, in buildings that were broken into 2 and 3 family units are now, again, single-family units. And that's a good thing. I'm going to talk about some of your small multis, doubles, triples, fours, in a minute. But there's a lot of investment that's taken place in a lot of those. I also want to, I'm going to flip, okay. Can I go to the next slide, please? Thank you. It sounds strange to say you have all this accelerated value in single-family home sales, and you see this really significant renovation activity in a lot of units, but you're still losing homeowner share in your market, which you are, about 9%. I want to suggest to you that that's got much more to do with the new multifamily units that you're adding than it does with somehow losing single-family properties. What I will say to you, and you can see it up here, it's also very different in different parts of the neighborhood. While the single-family home ownership rate in what I'm going to call South Norwood, which is where we're counting Carpenter Flats and University Station and all of that, went down significantly, not because we tore down units, but because we added a bunch of rental units. And again, when your market is not huge, adding 400 rental units changes the dial. If you look at parts of Norwood where there's lots of historic home renovation, the homeownership rates are actually going up. In the area between Regent and Ellesmere, it's up 45%. In the areas between Elm and Mills, up 33%. So even though this is a relatively small community, there's a lot going on, right? And trends moving in several different directions. Let me go to the next slide real quickly. So lots of price appreciation in your single family and homeowner product. Rent ranges are going up as well, but not as significantly. The upward pressure on rents has not been quite as heavy duty as the upward price on homeownership product. That may change when Factory 52 hits the market. I think that's going to put some upward pressure on rent structure here. University Station certainly puts upward pressure. University Station is a bit of a different animal because the unit rents are high, but what each student pays for a bed is, relatively affordable to students. If you could go to the next slide, I'll just give you a little bit of information on student housing and where we are in Xavier with the housing market right now. I think there's been a long-term objective for both Norwood and Xavier to pull students back closer to campus, more on campus and closer to campus. We've heard from Norwood for a long time that they don't want sort of the student housing market to bleed into all kinds of single-family zones in the community. To that end, I think Xavier has added a lot of on-campus and near-campus housing. Justice Hall, that opened in 2011, added 535 beds. It's a lot of units. University Station phases 1 and 2 have added 227 beds. And while we don't count that as on-campus housing, certainly close campus housing. And the intent is to pull students out of Norwood single-family homes back into these products. And it mostly, I think, has happened. However, I will tell you, particularly University of Station, those are more expensive units. And so there are certainly still students who would prefer to live in a cheaper unit in Norwood than a more expensive unit at University Station. One of the things I think about that as I watch prices appreciate in Norwood is eventually Xavier students are going to get priced out of the market. And I think it might happen in Evanston too. It will take longer, but it's going to happen in both neighborhoods. And I think that's something we need to think about because right now we've got something like 5,000 undergraduate students on campus and about half of them live on campus and about half of them live off near. Not all of them in Norwood, but many of them in Norwood. So that sort of gives you a sense, and you see our students in your demographics, you see them all over in the numbers that we look at. So what I want, next slide, please. I think that you're encouraging, this is a really robust, new housing product type trend in Norwood that is very new, I think. Historic home renovations, I count almost as new housing. It's a new product for you, much higher value. There are new multifamily units. What I want to tell you is there is some continuing need in Norwood that residents and others express that isn't getting met yet. So there's still other product types that I think you should add to the market, or you could add to the market that would serve your families better. Senior housing is one of them. I think this is across the board, but we definitely heard people say they'd like to stay in Norwood, but they don't want to live in their house anymore, and they don't really feel like there are options here. Handicapped accessible housing is something that I think definitely needs to be considered here. Housing that's affordable to your current residents who are experiencing upward pressures. One of the things we heard in Norwood, certainly, and in other parts, other communities that I just mentioned, is that there are a lot of residents who like what's happening, are excited to see what's happening, but say to themselves, I could not buy my house today. I would not be able to be in Norwood in the way that my family has been. And I think that gives people pause to some extent. Also, supportive housing, the sorts of things that you're doing to support other families. The next slide, please. I'm definitely. The other thing that I mentioned is that there is definitely a strain on households who are Norwood residents already, who are making less than $50,000 a year. I can tell you because I can't see that from here. About 3,000 households are cost burdened in Norwood. What that means is they're spending more than 30% of their income on their housing. Some of them are owners, some of them are renters, some of them are seniors. And about 1,500 households, 1,421 households are severely cost burdened, which means they're spending more than 50% of their income on their housing. What that means is it's harder to pay for transportation, buy food, buy medication, get all the stuff your kids need for school. The sort of rule of thumb that's been used by HUD and others for as long as I've been talking about this is that a household, to have a stable financial picture portfolio, should not spend more than 30% of their income on their housing. I tell this to my kid, I check it. We all need to understand that that's what a healthy amount of your income going to your housing looks like. And if you're spending more than that, life just gets a lot more difficult. And if you're spending 50% of your income on your housing, life gets a lot more difficult. There are 314, and this sounds very, in 2020, there are 314 senior homeowners who are cost burdened, 287 senior renter households who are cost burdened. Just to give you a sense of how big that market share is. Again, I said median rent in Norwood has risen 24% over 10 years. It's a rise, but it's not a huge rise. I think these new projects, Factory 52, will put a little bit more pressure on those rents moving forward. The next slide talks a little bit more about what your current affordable housing stock looks like. Here, I think that the housing stock of 2 families, 3 families, 4 families, small multis in Norwood is a really important, valuable resource in terms of affordable housing. And I think we historically have not looked at that kind of product like it was a value add in the community. Often those units are not in good shape. Often they're managed poorly. And so I think in a lot of cases, Norwood is not at all alone in this. Those kinds of products tend to get targeted for demolition. And then you lose affordable housing. And it's here. You don't have to do new rezoning for it. And you will look, and actually Norwood has a lot of 4s that are really in good shape. You certainly have your share of them that are not. But this is decent, affordable housing that already exists, that you don't have to do new rezoning for. And so encouraging appropriate property management and appropriate property maintenance becomes a really important part of holding on to that stock to provide affordability for people who live in Norwood. You have 64 federally assisted rental properties, in other words, site-based subsidized housing units. And as of July 2021, there were 224 voucher holders renting in Norwood. So that's not a huge percentage of your housing stock, but it's definitely some percentage, and it's likely that these kinds of buildings are accepting vouchers, so it's not like I can add them all up and get the exact number, because there's carryover in all of these. I'm almost done. This final is, I'm calling it recommendations here. I think it's really suggestions, things for you to think about as you move forward, wanting to you have a very stable housing market right now. It's not like you have to stabilize your housing market. It is really much more about expanding the product that's here and making sure that you're supporting your existing households. Encourage wider range of product types, talked about that. It's probably denser senior housing. It's maybe denser housing in redevelopment opportunity sites along Montgomery Road. Quality Inn comes to mind. There are several. You don't have a million redevelopment sites because this isn't a big community, but you have some. And thinking about how to maximize what you get out of a site like the U.S. Playing Card site, which I think you're doing a good job of, is a really important part of maximizing redevelopment. Quality Inn comes to mind, in those particular sites that are going to be redevelopment sites for you. Create a network, supports Norwood families, particularly Norwood families who need support, who are struggling to make ends meet. Maximize limited redevelopment sites, I just said that. Develop, and one of the things I will tell you that we have heard is that negotiating incentive packages for new development can be a complicated proposition. And if there were ways that you could create some standardized incentive packages, it would make life easier for developers who are coming to you, and would probably make life easier for you all as well. Targeted code enforcement and residential improvement program. So I'm going to take just one really little minute here, but it's an important, in communities that have housing stock that is as old as you do, property maintenance becomes really important. Because you want to keep your housing stock providing the kinds of good sanitary housing that it always has. And so it needs to be safe, sanitary, needs to look good, be nice if there was good landscaping, all of that sort of stuff. Those Cincinnati fours, I have lots of pictures that will show you the exact same Cincinnati four, one that looks like just hell on earth, and the other that you think I would move in there tomorrow. And the difference is how they're managed and in lots of cases, how the front yards are planted. Just that simple. You talk about targeted code enforcement, and I'm talking about single-family, small multis. There has been a great debate in Hamilton County in recent years about whether there would be a housing court or not, and whether a housing court is a good idea, and the intent is that you would hold big REITs and commercial owners of single-family and multifamily buildings accountable, and then what happens is you trip up cost-burdened homeowners who haven't been able to maintain their properties. And so I think it becomes really important to both think about code enforcement and stand up home improvement programs that can be made available to residents who need that kind of support. And I will say to you, I'm going to end where I began, which is the county initiated this work because they wanted communities who are interested in using CDBG allocations and other kinds of resources the county had available to focus on housing. That is still so, and it is even more so now. When we started this work, we were really just talking about CDBG allocation and some infrastructure dollars. Now, the county's Recovery Act funds, they are in the process of setting aside a fairly sizable fund for affordable housing activities, another fund for big catalytic economic development activities, several of which I think you guys may have the opportunity to forward. And I hope that this report puts you at the front of the line. I mean, that was the idea at the county in the first place. It was to say communities who have thought about this, who have been strategic about this, and who have the background to make the recommendations around project types need to be at the front of the line. And so I think I can tell you, the county has consulted with Ernst & Young, big national consulting firm, to put together the criteria that they will use to get out all these different pots of funds. And at the end of the year last year, I did the last of 3 sessions with Ernst & Young, and I think they are probably getting they're probably getting ready to send out eligibility criteria. I don't want to commit time. And Steve Johns from the county would be the point of contact, and I know he's very familiar. I mean, he also supported the Montgomery Road Corridor Study. I think recommendations from the Montgomery Road Corridor Study, along with this Housing Action Plan, in some places, you could marry stuff up, will be very competitive in those processes. And that's maybe enough for now, and I apologize for going long. And I'm happy to answer questions, or I'm happy to sit down, whichever you prefer.
Well, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Mrs. Bloom?
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that, that input. That was a lot of work.
And there are reports here, and there's full documents as well.
Perfect.
We have the link.
Thank you. Several things you said that piqued my interest. And I'm trying to recollect. You said that our new multi-unit structures are affecting our rental
Are affecting
numbers?
your home ownership rates for sure, and the rental numbers, right? The rental sale number, or the rental rate numbers. And primarily at this point, University Station, and, I mean, it's primarily University Station because you haven't experienced Factor 52 yet. Nobody's rented anything yet.
And another thing you mentioned, I appreciate that. I really do. This is some great stuff. I'm just trying to soak it all in.
Yeah, and I'm happy to, yeah, if
So
there's,
another thing you said was you think that we should come up with some standardized incentives for our developers.
Yes.
And that's kind of, to me, it doesn't really seem, because we don't have standardized properties. Each property is different, so how do we, so that's something else that comes to mind when I'm thinking of that. Also, are we not supposed to embrace our housing market and how it's doing better nowadays? I own 4 homes myself. I've worked very hard.
I think the answer
I own
is,
4 homes
the
here in
short
Norwood.
answer is absolutely yes.
Yes.
Market appraisal appreciation is a good thing, but it has unintended consequences. And I think that communities that both enjoy the accelerated values, but also do things to protect households that are going to be damaged by that, are going to have the most stable housing markets, right?
I appreciate
I think it's both, I think it's a both and.
Great. I just, a couple things that come to mind. I've basically done everything. One of the last home I bought was a multifamily home, and it's now single family. So I was just interesting, the things you said. So I appreciate everything you've done today. Thank you.
You know, it's so the thing that's really interesting, like, you want property, one of the ways that most Americans create wealth, middle-class people create wealth with the value of their homes going up. And the more your value of your home goes up, the more equity you have. And that's a good thing, mostly. But if you are struggling with taxes on appraisals that increase, or if you're struggling to maintain the roof or put the front porch back on, or any of those things, then it becomes a two-edged sword. And so I think that it's about being conscious of the downside of that for those residents who are cost-burdened and who are struggling. Again, it's another both and, right? It is absolutely a good thing. It means your tax proceeds go up. It means people's equity in their homes goes up. But some people get left behind. And paying attention to the folks that get left behind, I think, is important.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Anyone else? Mrs. Hoover?
I have several questions. First, thank you. This was dense but very good, very, very interesting reading. I have a sort of a follow-up question to Mr. Bearden's. In terms of the incentive packages, I was curious what that might some
Well, so that's a good question. I mean, some Sometimes it's tax abatement, sometimes it's how you negotiate TIFs, sometimes it is gap financing that you might want to put together. And you're certainly right, and you guys aren't dealing with like 500 projects a year, but if you knew how you were, if you had some kind of criteria, maybe among yourselves, about this is how we're going to treat more, we really want senior multifamily. I'm just going to make that up for a minute. We really want senior multifamily, so we feel compelled to give an attractive incentive package to people who want to put together senior multifamily, and it's going to look like this. So that essentially you're not making it up at the negotiating table. And in some ways, I mean, obviously developers always want everything they can get, but not in a bad way. But if you can be clear at the outset about the incentives that you have that are available that you're willing to approve, then they could figure out what their pro forma is. So, I mean, just, it's about more clarity around what you have to offer, what you're willing to accept, and to be specific about, I mean, you don't want to incent everything, because, you don't need everything. So I think it is maybe clear, maybe it's a conversation among you all before the fact, so that you don't have to go through it every time you have somebody in front of you. It's that kind of thing. And I must admit, I don't know the current desk, but you negotiate with yourselves and with the school board every time. There are communities that have a standard agreement with the school board, and then that's done, and you don't have to do that every time. I mean, that's something that you could consider as well. And it's intended to give clarity to a developer who wants to understand what their options are, and for you to have some ease of negotiation, and maybe streamline negotiation, shorten it a little bit.
Ms. Hoover, do you have some other
I
questions?
do, I actually have a lot of questions. Some of them I can follow up later.
Yeah, I mean,
One of the things that I'm aware of is the lack of bodies that we have to do things. And when I was looking over the recommendations, which sound fantastic, my first thought was, who's going to do that? Who would create the community support list? Who would look at what our housing stock is, say, on Montgomery Road? So
the answer is lots. So Norwood Schools has a really wonderful collaborative group that works with Norwood families, lots of whom are in this under $50,000 household range. And maybe just being aware of that, so that when somebody shows up at City Hall and says, I'm having a hard time with my rent, you guys know who to refer them to. It's not that the city of Norwood has to do everything. There are some things the city of Norwood needs to do. Code enforcement, incentives, those are zoning, those are all city of Norwood things. But supporting families and networks, I mean, it is not simple, I was gonna say, as simple as knowing who your partners are out in the community, and then knowing to reach out and knowing to refer, and understanding that, I mean, Lydia's house has options. Do I know those numbers? For social workers, the term is a warm handoff, right? It is that sort of connection among civic groups and the city of Norwood and your partners. So for that one, I think Hamilton County wants to be a partner here, and I am sure that one of the things, so you got technical support from, LISC and CBI and Hamilton County here. I think Hamilton County would like to be a partner, and they would like to understand if there's technical support. So for example, housing opportunities on Montgomery Road. The Montgomery Road corridor study spoke to that, and that was a partnership between the city and the county. So, I mean, I think there are resources out there that you guys could take advantage of. And again, I think this work in part and the Montgomery Road corridor study as well really helps you get positioned. And you have new staff who has some new
Give it all to
great
him.
professional capabilities that you didn't have a year ago. And I think that's a really good thing. If Norwood Together, which is also a really good thing. So the city of Norwood doesn't have to do everything. You have to do some things, but there are also partners in the community who I think could play an important role.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Winbauer?
Yes, same thank you for this. I really enjoyed going through it all. I had a few questions and just kind of your expertise as well. Have you seen any cities do a great job of that balance of single-family homes and multi-housing on trying to identify what's a good balance for them, what works for them to maintain that affordable housing while also
I think there are lots of places where the balance works really well. But every community is different. So, I mean, it's like, I'm not going to say, well, 25% of your stock should be multifamilies and 75% should be singles. I'm not even going to say that. That might be close to where you would, but I don't think there's not like a benchmark like that. I think you have to ask yourself, Olean site, let's just use it. If that site were some commercial in the front and another 200 units in the back, and I can think, there's probably 3 more sites on Montgomery Road where you could do 50 units. So then what is the mix, right? You didn't bust up any of your single-family blocks. You encouraged people to still be doing historic conversions back to singles, but you could add another, 400 or 500 units that were in higher density stuff in your redevelopment sites and along the corridor, supports the business district, provides all kinds of housing options. And then what does that get you, right? I mean, I think people say more density in suburban communities and it scares people because they don't want to bust up single-family blocks. And I think that's right. You shouldn't bust up single-family blocks, but you have opportunities. And then once those opportunities are done, then there you are, right? So that's what's right for Norwood.
One thing that I love that you hit on is maintaining the history of Norwood and the people who live here and want to stay but can't live in
Yeah.
the beautiful big houses we have. And so that's one thing that I do love. And I noticed here that it said that they're currently prohibited for the S1151.24. And I tried to look that up. I didn't get any info on it, but
Mine or Mike's? Mike, is that in your report?
Making,
yeah, the RMX code zone. I can look more into it. I just didn't know.
Well, I'm happy to have we
Yeah.
can certainly talk, and Mike is, you're expert on zoning at this point. But there are all kinds of ways to make some modifications that would make the zoning code sort of work more on your behalf as opposed to be a barrier.
Mike, can you come to the mic so everyone can hear you?
Can I approach you guys for 5 minutes?
Sure.
So, my name is Mike Skelly. I'm your Community Development Director for the last 8 months. I'm also a land use planner, so I share a lot with Liz. But whether it's because of my own philosophy or sometimes just different experience, I also have different objectives and different tact. So tonight, in terms of my official speech, is contained, and I'm happy you have it, both my October 22nd memo, and then I also have a supplemental. I made some copies, in addition to what you have a part of the PowerPoint. But what I'm going to do in hopefully less than 5 minutes is boil it down to what Liz Bloom finished with, funds. And I'm going to say this twice. This is all about the money. Let me repeat. It's the money is the key thing to be aware of right now. In my memo on the first page at the bottom, there's 3 bullet points. Those are the community development block funds that are provided through the county. We're talking over $5 million. When I came here, part of things sometimes planners get tasked with, rightly or wrongly, is looking after different funds, et cetera. And the first thing we need to do is look, what are your policies? And immediately I came to the realization, we don't have any. So at the time we had relaunched the Pike for Montgomery Road, that's great. But we didn't have any kind of overall comprehensive plan or a housing document. In August, this draft was released, and that's where I got involved reviewing it. It's my experience that recently, the city has several thousands of dollars worth of road and sidewalk improvements. That's community development block grant funding. That's out of the $5 million. When I was the planning consultant, if I would charge for what you received tonight for that housing study, that's, at least I would bill $35,000 easily for that in terms of document. You got it for free. You need that. Right. So you need that document to go after the funds. It's just part of the dance, so to speak. So in addition to that, recently, I made application to the county as well for storefront facade improvements. We will likely get $200,000 to provide for maybe up to 10 properties to get it improved. Again, it's about the money. So again, I say that, and sometimes I was kind of looking around when people talk about affordable housing, social policies, their eyes roll, and they get bored and they start listening. So I take a different tact. My objectives is talked about the money. And again, underline that again, it's the money that we need to look at. So, I applaud Liz and the group for doing this. As a land use planner, it's essentially needed, but I take different views on time statistics, what we should be looking at, and more importantly, representing the city. But again, it's crucial to understand what this gets us. So the takeaway is that, not necessarily tonight, but sometime in the very near future, what Liz and the group is looking for is an endorsement of this document. So it doesn't have to be tonight. There could be further discussion. Please email me, call me, ring me up, whatever you need to do, and I can drill down through the minutia until you understand it, feel comfortable. I have additional handouts that I have, but by all means, once we get there, by all means, adopt the policy document. We need it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Miracle?
Mr. Moore?
Everybody else is done. I usually don't speak on stuff, but I wanted to ask a couple of questions and make a couple of comments. First, Ms. Bloom mentioned the last housing study, which was like 15 years ago, whenever it was, and basically we're in exactly the opposite situation we were in at that point. The RMX zoning, which prevents you from breaking a single family into a two-family or a two-family into a three-family, or if it's been empty long enough, if it's a two-family that was empty, now it's a one-family. Tough. And because the problem we were facing then was the housing stock was in bad shape, the property values were low, people were not looking to buy here. I mean, there was some movement, but for the most part, compared to today, they were not looking to buy here. And people, when a house did go up for sale, and it was usually because an older person had to move out or passed away, that's the only movement we had in the market then, it was bought by an investor as often. I had to bid against somebody who wanted to make my house housing, or Xavier Housing. It's a big house, but that was what we had. So the RMX zoning says you can't break it up, because we had investors that would buy a big house and then break it up into multi-units and you'd rent it. And so that was the movement in the market now, and then, and the movement now is very, very different. And the same thing is true for the CRA, which applies to all the residential in the whole city. And I think that it's definitely worth looking at. We need to take a different perspective on all of the housing situation, because the situation has changed so dramatically. I had a question. When you talk about, and one of the big issues, because the big change from the big issue that faces people now that the market has changed so much is that now people are getting priced out, which is a new thing for Norwood. I don't even know how many decades. And the question is, and I understand the need for affordable housing. I understand the situation where there's people that just can't. I couldn't buy the house I'm in now, and I've only lived there for 15 years. So if we, and I understand the idea of we want affordable housing, we want a housing mix. When we talk about the market, though, I'm just wondering, within the housing ideas you come up with, is the idea that, okay, it's 3 square miles. So when we talk about we need this percentage of affordable housing to help the residents that can't afford what we have now, those residents aren't going to be the same, because we're just surrounded by this huge other market. And so much of these market forces have got nothing to do with Norwood. I mean, some of it is because there have been some really cool things that have happened here, but a big chunk of it is just this Hamilton County. People are getting priced out. And within the strategies that we're looking at, I'm just wondering how much of that like regional reality is factored into the kinds of things that we should be looking at doing.
look like you.
Well, you take the first step.
So, I mean, you have some levers. You're right. The market is the market. You're not going to keep a house that is on the market today for $350,000. You're not going to turn it into a $200,000 unit. You're not. I think the levers you have are zoning, how you apply incentives, like CRAs, like TIFs, what you broadcast to the development community is of interest to you. I think those are the kinds of levers that you have. I think that allowing for production, so I can remember back in the day too, one of the things that Norwood really stressed in the early days after GM closed was commercial development. All that sort of stuff behind Surrey Square was all about getting as much commercial tax dollars into the community as possible to replace what you lost with GM. And so the land use choices that got made at that point were very much about as much commercial development as we can. Today, you might decide that some of those parcels should have been there's not any second guessing. It might mean, though, that today you decide that the Quality Inn is a better housing site than a commercial site. Those are the kind of levers that you have. You can't change the market, but you can control your zone, you can control your incentives, and you can broadcast what you're looking for. And in that way, and encourage subsidies and affordability. And sometimes you can do that with funding. Okay, Mike.
So you raised 2 points in terms of who decides. From my understanding, essentially how I would approach it is that the New Jersey Supreme Court, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and I believe there's a test case in Columbus, use the fair share doctrine. So you could study that, and there's criteria you could use. That's essentially a regional approach where you allocate based on the urban area, the suburbs, et cetera, and what is the best fit. So that's the best equitable way to decide that. In terms of who's building affordable housing, to me, it's very clear, and there's 2 ways. A lot of the, I would say, larger or the better developers, they get low-income housing tax credits through the Ohio Finance for Housing Agency. And that's several $1 million worth, and they can make a go at it through that subsidy and do it well, and also through TIFs. The other way, density bonuses, which we have a PUD for the city. We can massage that. A lot of other jurisdictions provide a minimum of 5%, 10% for what they consider workforce housing, affordable housing, and you provide increases in height, increases in density, whatever. But really, who's building affordable housing? It's really developers that are shrewd enough to make use of the tax credits, and it was done in the 50s and the 40s and way back when, where the government would just build it. But that's not being done anymore. So I think hopefully those 2 responses answer your question.
Just on the second one of those, first, I would be shocked if the Ohio courts handed down the New Jersey rule or what they have, like the Missouri attempts and those. I would be stunned if they said, okay, for every 10 housing units you build, one of them's got to be affordable. I would be shocked. Ohio doesn't think that way, but I get your point, that should be, yeah, I'm all for that. The question is, when you look at what is the right mix for Norwood, and that's what we should be talking about, not the right mix for the region, because we represent Norwood. When you were thinking about, okay, we need an affordable housing mix, we should add that into what we're looking for when we talk to developers. The question is how much, I'm just curious how you get to that number, or if you've thought about what that number should be, or what that approach should be, or what our end goal is. As, given the fact that we're in a region, a larger region than just the 3 square miles. And it sounds like this is a much longer conversation, so maybe I should just shut up at this point.
Very interesting.
Well, thank you, everyone. Anyone else? Thank you, Mrs. Bloom. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I apologize for the length.
Our next item for council's consideration, item K, second reading of ordinance and resolutions. K1, resolution calling for a day of service in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. on Monday, January 17th, 2022. Mrs. Franzen,
I move that we accept the order.
the second reading.
Second reading. Sorry.
Thank you, Mrs.
Yeah.
Franzen. May I have a second?
Second the motion.
Mrs. Hoover, any discussion? Mrs. Hoover?
I'm not sure if this is the exact right time, but I do want to share what happened at the MLK Day of Service, which was the 17th. I want to thank again the mayor, Clint Zimmerman, the safety service director. Who else helped? Noah helped, a community member, Robin Cox, helped with the beautiful banner, which just made my heart so happy to see flying over Montgomery Road. Even with COVID, we had over 30 volunteers at numerous locations, got a lot of work done. It was very exciting. I'm hoping that this is the beginning of a long-standing tradition in Norwood. And I do know that I've been getting texts from people. My neighbor said, oh, I picked up garbage after the snow melted. I was like, send me a picture, it doesn't count. So I do know that it did create some energy and some interest and some excitement, so I was really excited about that, and just wanted to share that was the result of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoover. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen,
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover,
Yes.
Ms. Royce,
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer,
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes.
Resolution calling for a day of service in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. on Monday, January 17th, 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Moving on to item L, introductory reading of ordinances and resolutions. L1, a resolution celebrating the month of February 2022 as Black History Month in the city of Norwood, Ohio. Mrs. Hoover?
Motion to read the ordinance.
First reading.
First reading, sorry, thank you, sir.
Motion by Mrs. Hoover to have the first reading. May I have a second? Mrs. Franzen?
I second that.
Second by Mrs. Franzen. Any discussion?
Can I
Mrs.
ask the
Hoover?
full reading, the reading in full?
You would like to have the first reading in full?
Yes, please.
Would you amend your,
Yes. Can I amend
Don't laugh.
my motion to have the first reading in full?
Mrs. Franzen?
I second that as well.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen,
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover,
Yes.
Ms. Royce,
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer,
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
All members present, voting aye, the motion passes. Mr. Gears.
A resolution celebrating the month of February 2022 as Black History Month in the city of Norwood, Ohio. Whereas in 1776, people envisioned the United States as a new nation dedicated to the proposition stated in the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And whereas Africans were first brought involuntarily to the shores of the United States as early as the 17th century, and whereas African Americans suffered enslavement and subsequently faced the injustices of lynch mobs, segregation, and denial of the basic and fundamental rights of citizenship, and whereas in 2022, the vestiges of those injustices and inequalities remain evident in the society of the United States, and whereas in the face of injustices, people of goodwill and of all races in the United States have distinguished themselves with a commitment to the noble ideals on which the United States was founded and have fought courageously for the rights and freedoms of African Americans and others. And whereas African Americans such as Lieutenant Colonel Allen Allensworth, Maya Angelou, Louis Armstrong, Arthur Ashe Jr., James Baldwin, James Beckworth, Clara Brown, Blanche Bruce, Ralph Bunch, Shirley Chisholm, Holt Collier, Miles Davis, Larry Doby, Frederick Douglass, W.E. Du Bois, Ralph Ellison, Medgar Evers, Aretha Franklin, Alex Haley, Dorothy Height, John Hendricks, Olivia Hooker, Lena Horn, Charles Hamilton Houston, Mahalia Jackson, Stephanie Tubbs Jones, B.B. King, Martin Luther King Jr., Coretta Scott King, Thurgood Marshall, Constance Baker Motley, Rosa Parks, Walter Payton, Bill Pickett, Homer Plessy, Bass Reeves, Hiram Revels, Amelia Platts Boynton Robinson, Jackie Robinson, Aaron Shirley, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Booker T. Washington, the Greensboro Four, the Tuskegee Airmen, Prince Rogers Nelson, Reese Taylor, Fred Shuttlesworth, Duke Ellington, Langston Hughes, Muhammad Ali, Ella Fitzgerald, Mamie Till, and Edith Savage Jennings, along with many others, worked against racism to achieve success and to make significant contributions to the economic, educational, political, artistic, athletic, literary, scientific, and technological advancements of the United States. And whereas contributions of African Americans from all walks of life throughout the history of the United States reflect the greatness of the United States, and whereas many African Americans lived, toiled, and died in obscurity, never achieving the recognition those individuals deserved, and yet paved the way for future generations to succeed. And whereas African Americans continue to serve the United States at the highest levels of business, government, and the military. And whereas the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass inspired the creation of Negro History Week, the precursor of Black History Month, and whereas Negro History Week represented the culmination of the efforts of Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black history, to enhance knowledge of Black history through the Journal of Negro History, published by the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, which was founded by Dr. Carter G. Woodson and Jesse E. Moreland. And whereas Black History Month, celebrated during the month of February, originated in 1926, when Dr. Carter G. Woodson set aside a special period in February to recognize the heritage and achievements of Black people in the United States. And whereas Dr. Carter G. Woodson stated, "We have a wonderful history behind us. If you are unable to demonstrate to the world that you have this record, the world will say to you, you are not worthy to enjoy the blessings of democracy or anything else." And whereas, since its founding, the United States has imperfectly progressed toward noble goals. And whereas the history of the United States is a story of people regularly affirming high ideals, striving to reach those ideals but often failing, and then struggling to come to terms with the disappointment of that failure before committing to try again. And whereas on November 4th, 2008, the people of the United States elected Barack Obama, an African-American man, as President of the United States. And whereas on February 22nd, 2012, people across the United States celebrated the groundbreaking of the National Museum of African American History and Culture, which opened to the public on September 24th, 2016, on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., District of Columbia. And whereas on January 20th, 2021, Kamala Harris, a woman of color, was the first woman to be sworn in as Vice President of the United States of America. Now therefore be it resolved by the Council of the City of Norwood, State of Ohio, that it acknowledges that all people in the City of Norwood are the recipients of the wealth of history provided by Black culture, recognizes the importance of Black History Month as an opportunity to reflect on the complex history of the United States, including the City of Norwood, while remaining hopeful and confident about the path ahead, acknowledges the significance of Black History Month as an important opportunity to commemorate the tremendous contributions of African Americans to the history of the United States, including the City of Norwood, encourages the celebration of Black History Month to provide a continuing opportunity for all people in the City of Norwood to learn from the past and understand the experiences that have shaped the United States, agrees that while the United States began as a divided country, the United States must honor the contribution of all pioneers in the United States who have helped to ensure the legacy of the great United States, and move forward with purpose, united tirelessly as a nation indivisible with liberty and justice for all, and declares February 2022 to be Black History Month in Norwood, Ohio, to encourage our residents to learn about Black history.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Moving on to the next item, L2, ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Slane Avenue Street Improvement Project within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Braden.
Is it appropriate for a motion for all three readings, or do we have enough?
You do not have enough. You have to have 6
So,
votes to
motion-
suspend the rules and have more than one reading.
Thank you, sir.
Correct, Mr. Moore?
Correct.
Motion for a first reading, please.
Motion by Mr. Braden to have the first reading.
First and second reading of the ordinance.
You can't do that either.
It's more than one reading.
First reading.
Just one reading.
First reading.
Motion by Mr. Braden to have the first reading. May I have a second? Mrs. Winterbauer? Thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Mayor?
If I could add in here, there's one part in this that's not really, I take sort of, it says in the first part, whereas the city of Norwood benefit from outside funding to reconstruct the pavement. Recognize that this is $466,000 that is being loaned to us. It is not outside funding. We are paying for it out of our tax money. It's a 0% interest loan, which is great, and we can get more done. But it's not really outside funding as it is stated here. We're paying for it out of our money, okay? So I think that's important to understand because we're doing these street projects, but we're paying for them, we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. So a question for the mayor. So does that mean that we should not be reading this? It should just be corrected before we move on, or is this going to be?
No, it's just a point of clarification.
Okay.
That we are paying our tax money, the money that we have to allocate for funds is being used here.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't need to be changed, but
Okay, thanks.
should be clarified.
Thank you, Mayor Snyder. We have a motion by Mr. Braden, a second by Mrs. Winterbauer. Have the first reading. Mrs. Franzen, did you have your hand up?
Nope, I was going to second it. It's already
Oh, okay.
seconded.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Sir.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes.
Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the Slane Avenue Street Improvement Project within the city of Norwood, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Moving on to item L3, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety Service to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission state capital improvement and/or local transportation improvement programs and to execute contracts as required and declare an emergency. Mr. Braden.
Motion to have the first reading.
Motion by Mr. Braden to have the first reading. Mrs. Hoover?
I second.
I second.
Second by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Mr. Mayor?
On this one, we were putting applications in. We could get loans, we could get grants, so there's a couple of different opportunities with this, but this just opens the door for us to ask for those.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anyone else? Mrs. Franzen?
I had a question for the mayor. Is this something that, since we don't have enough people to do all 3 readings, is this something that we should perhaps have a special meeting about if it's particularly urgent, as enough to
I don't
declare an
think-
emergency?
Mr. Mayor?
I don't think it is particularly urgent. If it is, I'll hear from the safety service director
Excellent.
first thing in the morning, and we'll be setting something
All right.
up.
Thank you, Mayor Snyder. Thank you, Mrs. Franzen. Did I see someone else's hand up? No? Okay. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes.
Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety Service to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission state capital improvement and/or local transportation improvement programs, and to execute contract as required and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. Moving on to item M, administrative reports. Mayor Schneider.
Thank you, President Miracle. A couple things. First, I'd like to thank, and a couple of them have already left, and we've all heard before many times, surround yourself with smart people and sort of get out of their way. And what you saw was Liz Bloom and Mary C. Miller, both who are smart and savvy people, and they came to me at the beginning and said, these are some of the things we need to put in place. We brought Mike Skelly on for his expertise, another smart guy that's getting us going in the right direction. We've got Catherine Fitzgerald, who works with HCDC, Hamilton County Development Corp., that's working with us, and we also have Andy Brossert. And we've put together really a strong team. I want to slide that down so that we've put together a really strong team of good people that are moving us in the right direction and helping us take advantage of every opportunity that we can in the city of Norwood. And what Mr. Moore brought up is absolutely true. 20 years ago, when I was involved in this, that housing plan was totally different. And what we saw as being, really necessary has sort of changed. And it's interesting. We have to change. The city of Norwood has to change as we move on, so that, some of the key points on that, the housing market is changing. Affordable housing issues are out there. How do we fix it? I have 4 children. I'd like for my children to be around Norwood, but quite frankly, it's getting tougher and tougher for our families, for that second generation, unless they're going to live with us, me, or I don't know. I'd really like for them to have some opportunities to stay in here. And then same thing for my mother, who's getting ready or could sell her home at any time. I'd like for her to stick around here. So providing those things, and I think Mike Skelly and that whole team are really looking at the whole package, and that's what is necessary in putting things in place. Student population always, our enrollment in our schools, we're doing all these upgrades to our schools and making our schools so much better, but our enrollment's down. We were 2,000, now we're down to about 1,700. So there's some changes, and we really need to be, working with and trying to look at the best way to move forward on that. Some things about what's going on with the city. There's a couple of different water main breaks that are going on right now. When you have real freezes and thaws, we have an older water system, and you will see some of these breaks go through, but we have pressure regulating valves that are being checked. We have a lot of different system checks that are going in place to try to make sure that we're not having those. And that's one of the nice things about having our safety service, or our superintendent of public works, Clint Zimmerman, really knows this system well. So he's already scratching his head saying, wait a minute, are these just freeze and thaw, problems, or do we have some other system problems? He has worked close with the EPA. He's got the plan approved that we can take the water towers offline in the future. We've got to make some system upgrades, but we can get those off. And that has been an absolute headache and sort of a nightmare scenario when just a couple years ago, we were talking about, what if we have to replace the water towers, and how much does that cost, and what does that do to our system? So Clint has done a lot of work on that. The Financial Recovery Commission meets tomorrow. We meet at 9 o'clock. President Miracle and I have been working a lot on the accounting methods, and others have been working on the accounting methods. Some of the things that are involved in getting us out of the fiscal emergency is having an emergency operations plan, which we have, but then having sort of the funding tools, and how do we do that? And Keith has worked on a lot of that, making sure that we've got ordinances in place and different things. Asset tracking, we weren't tracking our assets as is required by general accounting procedure standards, so we're working on some of that. That's the Norcom group that's working on that stuff, the software and getting that going. And so there's a lot going on. Even management of our water office, our water distribution office, the policies and procedures that need to be in place there. How many times do they read a meter, and then all the different systems that they utilize there should be standardized, and we should have good manuals on it. And we have some manuals, but they're not as robust as they should be. So there's a lot of work that's being done to really get the city in shape and operating as much as a business as we can. Yes, it's a municipality and it's government, and you have all these different changes with the statutory regulations, but but we can really run this, there's a lot of stuff that we can run business-like and efficiently and effectively, and we're trying to get all those things in place, so we're still working on that. We're working on the fire contract, the union contracts. We've still got 3 more union contracts that we've got to settle. And I think that our team there has done a really great job, and they're close. I think the unions have stepped up to the table, and the membership is ready to move forward with some things. So we should be coming to council in the next, I would have liked for it to be this meeting, but maybe in the next meeting, with some union contracts for you to look over and to approve. So those are some of the things that are going on. And that's about it for my quick notes. I'll stop there. It's already probably a longer meeting than you guys really thought it would be. But we do have a great team and some really good people that are working. And I'll end it on this. You know, we are blessed to have people that really want the city of Norwood to do well. And I'm not talking about just city of Norwood people. We have people all over the county that are rooting for Norwood, and they see the potential of Norwood, and they are willing to put time and effort into our community. And it's really inspiring to me at times, because they come to a meeting just loaded with great ideas and things that they know can come to. So we're really blessed. We've got so many proponents of Norwood that for some reason there's a connection, and typically there's some sort of connection, but they're all over the place, and I'm glad to have them. So, all right.
Thank you, Mayor Schneider. Any questions or comments for Mayor Schneider? Thank you again, Mayor Schneider.
Thank you.
Moving on to item N, unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business this evening? Anyone? Okay, then we'll move on to any new business. Do we have any new business to bring forward tonight? Mr. Brayton?
Thank you, Mr. President. I have two items that I'd like to discuss. One of them, pretty upsetting to me. It should be to all of us in this room. New councilman, new councilwoman was not here the first time. But this is the second time that you all and myself and all of our loved ones has been compared to Klan members. So that's very upsetting to me. And my challenge is, find me one of them. Find me one of them. I've been here 50 years. Find me one. That infuriates me to no end. We were compared to Klan members. Find me one, because I want to know who it is. So very upsetting. That's it on that. I apologize that I had to say that, but I'm very serious about that. My second thing is, I want to congratulate the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm just, this is something, I've been waiting a long time for this. We all have been waiting a long time for this, and I want to just congratulate them and wish them well next Sunday.
Thank you, Mr. Brayton. Any further new business this evening? Mrs. Franzen?
Yes. I've learned more about football these last 2 weeks than I have in my entire life. So thank you I hate you, Bengals, for making me learn these things. I have 2 other items that are more relevant to the city. One is I want to try to set up a infrastructure committee meeting. I realize now that Eric is not here, but I wanted to see when people would have time that are in the infrastructure committee. I was thinking maybe 2 weeks from now, prior to this council meeting, around 6 or 6:30. I wanted to see if that would work for those other folks.
I can do that.
You can? Okay, cool. And then I will-
What's that day?
That would be 2 weeks from now.
February the 8th.
February 8th.
And Mr. Braden, you're on the committee as well, correct? Yes.
Yeah.
Would that work for you? Six,
That's perfect.
2 weeks ago? Okay, cool.
Perfect.
So
We'll plan on
February
that.
8th at 6 PM?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that'll-
Council chambers?
Council chamber, correct. That'll give us, a little halfway or half hour in case we run over past the hour that I hope that we can spend just talking about what's going on with the infrastructure, making sure there's nothing. I would wanted to have maybe Clint come and talk about what's going on with the city and the big infrastructure projects that are coming up, just to kind of give more information to us and to the city as a whole. So I feel like sometimes people don't really know exactly what's going on until their street is being closed off for water main repairs or streets. So I thought this might be a good opportunity to have some good news out there, because there's some really cool stuff coming up. I talked to Clint today, and I was really excited to hear all of what he has to say and all the ideas he has for the future. The second item I had was maybe more related to the Law and Ordinance Committee. I saw a discussion on Facebook about parking laws. One of the things that was pointed out is that our current parking ordinances, you're only really allowed to park in one space for 16 hours. You can be ticketed after that. Now, naturally, that's not really something that's really enforced, at least to my knowledge. But my worry would be that it will only take one vindictive neighbor who has a vendetta against someone to try to call that in and have a fellow citizen get in trouble for that. So I just wanted to bring that up to council and say that it might be worth looking into changing that, maybe bringing it more in line to other cities. Because I feel like 16 hours, that's like a day. That's a weekend. So, and I've broken that law more times than I can count, apparently. So that's just something I wanted to bring up now in the council. I'm not on the Law and Ordinance Committee, so whoever wants to do that.
Are you asking to have that placed into the law?
Yeah, I would like that.
Okay.
Yes.
So then, the Chair of Law and Ordinance.
And actually, you stole my day and time, thank you very much. On
purpose.
I had sent out an email and then I hadn't heard back. I'm trying to schedule my two committees, which is the Law and Ordinance and the Housing. And I would love to be able to do a deeper dive into the information that we got this evening and at that. So Burden, that's you for the housing, and Candace, what is your availability like? Are you an evening kind of person?
Yeah, evenings are fine. Thursdays are, Wednesday, Thursdays, any other day besides that would work fine.
So not Wednesday, Thursday?
I don't have my calendar with me, but, oh, yeah, not Wednesdays or Thursdays, please. But
Okay.
if it has to be, I can change my schedule.
Could we do, say, this Monday, the 31st?
Yes, ma'am.
In the evening?
Yes, ma'am.
Candace?
Week out?
Oh. Does it need to be a week out? Because that's only 6
No.
days.
No,
Okay.
it's it's 24-hour notice to put it out to.
Okay.
As long as it's after 5.
24 or 48.
Now, right now.
Does 6 work for folks?
Yeah. the
Okay,
31st.
so that would be 6 o'clock on Monday, the 31st, and here?
And that was
For
for
the
the housing?
housing.
Okay.
Might jump on the bandwagon then.
I got another one, though.
right.
I got 2. Okay, so that's that one, and then the other one is law, oh, but that's Eric. And I think he can only do Tuesdays. Does anyone know if that's accurate about his availability?
Tuesdays after 6.
Okay, so we can't do the 1st or the 8th. And the 15th feels really far out. Well, let's go ahead and do that. If we could, Tuesday, the 15th at 6, or, that's for the Law and Ordinance.
And that's here as well.
Here as well.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hoover. Anyone else? Mrs. Winterbauer?
Economic Committee meeting. Mr. Braden, you're on that, and I think Susan? Royce?
I'm on it.
Okay.
You guys have done all my committees today.
Good. So availability, we have the 1st, that's a Tuesday evening. Does that work?
That works for me.
You have an event Tuesday evening.
On the 1st? Yeah, I do. Thank you, Susan.
I know your schedule.
Yes. What if we do the 7th, Monday,
That works for me.
6 PM?
Yes.
Works?
I don't have my calendar. You said the second Monday, what's that date?
The 7th, Monday, the 7th,
The 7th.
February 7th, yes. And if we need to change it, just
Set a time yet?
6 PM?
That's in council chambers as well, Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. Then we'll move on to communications. Communications, item P1, Auditor's Office regarding December monthly financial reports. Mr. Gears.
Dear council members, this letter is to let you know that the December monthly financial reports were emailed to each council member on December 12th, 2021. If you have not received said email, please let me know so that I can verify your email address and also get you a copy of the reports. Sincerely, Kim Dallas, Account Clerk, Auditor's Office.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. May I have a motion? Mrs. Hoover.
I motion to have the letter received as written.
Received and filed. Thank you, Mrs. Hoover. May I have a second?
I'll
Mrs.
second
Rice.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Second. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen,
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover,
Yes.
Ms. Royce,
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer,
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Moving on to item P2, we have a letter from Mrs. Lake regarding the Retiree Benefit Committee.
Dear President Miracle and members of council, as you may know, Norwood City Council passed Ordinance 2018, creating the Retiree Benefit Program to replace the previous C9 VEBA Millennium Plan programs for retirees who worked for the city of Norwood prior to January 1, 1975, and had 20 accumulated years of full-time service. Prior to passage of this ordinance, the program had over 220 retirees, spouses, and children who were provided with health insurance and prescription drug coverage that was run by a third-party administrator with monthly fees. It was an unsustainable amount of expenditures that any governmental agency could afford. By communicating and working with the retirees, we were able to establish a new benefit program that changed to yearly lump sum payments to retirees and spouses only, and overseen by 5 volunteers consisting of 2 retirees and 3 appointed by the mayor. The original applications for the new program eliminated many who had erroneously been on the program, thereby lowering the number of those in the new program. Registrations are completed each year to remain in the program. The ordinance also required that the Retiree Benefit Committee report yearly to City Council as to the number of retirees in the benefit program. The committee has received all registrations for 2022 and verified that there will be 117 people eligible for the benefit program this year. I am sad to report that 8 retirees or spouses died in 2021. The registrations were submitted to the Auditor's Office in December for payment, which are due by March 31. Thank you for the opportunity to serve on this committee. Sincerely, Donna M. Lake, Retiree Benefit Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Gears. May I have a motion to receive and file? Mr. Braden.
Motion to receive and file the letter.
Motion by Mr. Braden. May I have a second? Mrs. Franzen.
I second.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen,
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover,
Yes.
Ms. Royce,
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer,
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that we move into executive session to discuss pending litigation.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. May I have a second? Mrs. Franzen.
I second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen,
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover,
Yes.
Ms. Royce,
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer,
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, sir.
All members present voting aye. We are in executive session at 9:15. And we are out of executive session at 9:45. Moving on to item L4, ordinance authorizing the settlement of a claim by Meg Albers and declaring an emergency. Mrs. Franson.
I move we have the first reading of this ordinance.
Motion by Mrs. Franson to have the first reading. May I have a second? Mrs. Hoover?
Second the motion?
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen,
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover,
Yes.
Ms. Royce,
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer,
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
No.
We have 5 members present, 4 ayes, 1 no. Motion passes. Moving on to, I'm sorry, please go ahead, Mr. Gears. got ahead of myself.
Ordinance authorizing the settlement of a claim by Meg Albers and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison. Moving on to item Q, excuse absent members. May I have a motion to excuse absent members? Mrs. Franzen.
I motion to excuse them.
Motion by Mrs. Franzen. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Mrs. Royce?
I'll second the motion.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes.
All members present, voting aye. Motion passes. Moving on to item R, adjournment. May I have a motion for adjournment? Mrs. Hoover.
I motion for adjournment.
Motion by Mrs. Hoover. May I have a second? Mrs. Winterbauer. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Franzen.
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover.
Yes.
Ms. Royce.
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes.
All members present, voting aye. We are adjourned.